Welcome to Blackbriar Gaming. Today we're going to look at a Ray deck. I've decided to double down on Vigilance so that we can play the event of that very name for only 4 resources. 2 resources if we've got Bendu on the board, which seems really obnoxious. Shadows of the Galaxy has given Vigilance some really interesting tools to stabilize the board in the mid-game and go hard to close out in the late game. I think we're going to see a lot more monocolor decks in set 2, and I think this particular deck has some decent competitive value to it. So first off, let's look at Ray's card. She is a 6-cost leader. She's a 2/6. She comes out obviously on 6 resources. Her action on her non-deployed side is spend 1 resource and tap her to give an experience token to a unit with 2 or less power. So once we look at the deck, you'll see that there's quite a few units that are doing just that, and pushing them up with experience is just really nice. When she deploys, she is a 2/6, noting that she has Restore 3, which is why we're running her, because I just think that's really, really good. And her ability is that when she attacks, you may give an experience token to a unit with 2 or less power. So it's essentially her leader ability, but you get to do it for free when she attacks. Noting, of course, that she can give it to herself to go up to a 3/7 before she attacks, which is actually pretty good stats for someone who also has Restore 3 and just continues to hand out those experience if she sticks around on the board. So I think Ray is probably one of the best hero Vigilance leaders that we've got, if not the best. I mean, Luke and Chirrut both have their own decks. I think Chirrut decks are going to really struggle in set 2 because we now have Rivals Fall, and Luke decks, I'm not so sure. Maybe they'll still be good, and there's probably a Mandalorian deck with Luke that does some really, really good stuff. But I was really interested with running solo Vigilance hero with set 2 because you couldn't really do it with set 1. There was a item deck that could run with Vigilance with a blue base and could do work and actually did quite well and won some events, but hero Vigilance, double Vigilance that is, just didn't work. There weren't enough cards for it. But now, I think we have enough, and it all comes down to being able to run one of the best events, if not the best event, in the game on 4 resources, if not cheaper, with some shenanigans. So let's get into the deck. The order we'll do this, I'll essentially go through the turn orders, looking at the units, and then follow up with a deeper look at the events and the upgrades. So for our 2 drops, we have Follower of the Way, we have Kuil, or Kuil, however we pronounce that, and we've got Regional Governor, and then we've got a Restored Arc 170. So looking at them, Follower of the Way, that's that Mandalorian card. He's a 1/3 for 2, and while this unit is upgraded, it gets +1/+1. So with Ray's ability, that means that once you tap Ray, and it would have to be at essentially the start of your second turn when you've got some resources, noting that you're then playing below curve. So it's not optimal, but there's not a lot of great 2 drops when you're going solo blue in hero. I am so jealous of Villain with their 2-drop that is a 2/3 Sentinel. I would just love to run that card in this deck, and I think Villain solo Vigilance might be a little stronger, but then we don't get to run some of the really cool cards that we're running in here. So Follower of the Way, he's in there. There might be some better choices. Val is another card that just dropped recently with that bounty that could really hurt, and she probably belongs more in a grit deck, but I'm getting distracted. Follower of the Way, while it's upgraded. So if you chuck a Ray resource on there, he goes up to a 3/5, which for 3 is pretty good stats, noting that there's plenty that have ability on there, but it means you've got a 3/5 on the board real early that can then attack in and do a really nice trade for you, even though you're then also doing another 2-drop on turn 2. But there it is. That is the Follower of the Way. We've got Kuil in there, or Kuil. 2/3 for 2 with Restore 1, which is some great stats there. With the ability on attack, discard a card from your deck. If it shares an aspect of your base, return it to your hand, which it's going to do every single time. I'm looking if I've got any solo hero cards in here. I don't think I do. So they're all blue aspect, Vigilance aspect cards in this deck. So every single time Kuil attacks, you're giving yourself a card straight into your hand. That is just fantastic for an ability on top of a 2/3 that also has Restore. I think that is a very, very powerful 2-drop. Every time I see him, I play him. I think he's fantastic. On top of that, we've got the Regional Governor, which just gives you some really interesting play in the early, mid, and late games. That's been discussed enough, I'm sure, on the internet. But the ability is when played, name a card. While this unit is in play, an opponent can't play the named card. So has all kinds of reasons, especially late game, stopping Avengers coming out against you. But why I really like this is because Ray can then, of course, jump in and pump her up with experience twice if you're that way inclined over a couple of turns to make her really difficult to kill and make sure that she's actually doing some damage back to your opponent. Then we finish off with the Restored Arc. It's got Restore 1, it's in space, it's doing some damage, and if you do give it an experience, it can actually do some really great work with holding off an aggro Space Rush. Going up to a 3-4 in turn 2 to then start clearing the space lane is actually really good, and being able to take out a couple of space units from a Sabine deck is a really nice ability, and why I think the Restored Arc shines in this deck much more so because of Ray's ability than any other deck. So that is your turn 1 drops. Going into turn 2, we're looking at our 3 costs, and we have 3 costs in here. We've got Yoda, who is just absolute value as a 2-4 with Restore 2, and giving you a card when it is defeated. So Yoda's great, still remains great. We'll continue to see play in set 2. The next one is a new card with Shadows of the Galaxy called Village Protectors. It is a shielded Sentinel. It is only a 2-2, true, noting that it goes up to a 3-3 if you give it a bit of Ray love, but it is a shielded Sentinel, which is just, can be absolutely backbreaking for early game aggro actions. A shielded Sentinel for this cheap is really good. And then in space, we're doing similar things. We've got a Concord Dawn Interceptors, 1-4, but when defending gets the +2. Once again, prime for some Ray pumping up here. It is also a Sentinel. So our 3 drops are really about locking down the board and creating some speed bumps in the early turns of the game. Going into 4 drops, things start getting pretty spicy. So from a unit perspective, we've got Baze and Razor Crest. Now, the 4 drops are probably the most contentious points of deck construction for Hero Vigilance. There's a great argument to be made for the Nima Outpost Constables, maybe Rose. There's a new card, Sugi, which is a double Vigilance, which of course we can run. These cards are all great, and though Rose in particular encourages further deck modifications to drive that shield synergy, if this deck changes with continued playtesting, it's probably going to be in this 4-drop space. The reasons I went here, Baze is that 4-drop that will probably most reliably give you Sentinel. So you have to have the initiative, but you really want the initiative with this deck. In fact, it's not unreasonable to be passing on turn 1 to grab that initiative and just run with it so you can really close them down so they're not hitting you in the face every single turn, just that first time. So Baze is a Sentinel with the initiative that you're hopefully going to have. Things are probably going wrong if you haven't. And with Shadows, I think the Shadows meta decks will really slow down. So there's plenty of leaders out there, Kylo being a good example, Jabba being another good example. I think these leaders are going to be popular, and they're going with quite a slow game plan. So I think Baze goes up a bit in value with the ability to have the initiative a bit higher for this deck compared to some other common decks that I think we'll see. Him having Grit is absolutely fantastic, so you can start to hit back with him once he takes damage and actually do some really nice trading. So that's why Baze is in there. Then you've got and of course, can get pumped up with Ray before he takes any damage, going up to a 3-6. Then we've got Razor Crest with Restore 2 is just really nice. We needed something at this point in the game to also help the Concord Dawn Interceptors to fight any kind of space incursion going on. But the Restore 2 there is also really handy. You'll notice there's a lot of Restore in this deck because it really relies on that Restore to stay in the game. If you're not restoring with this deck, you will lose the race and you will die before you can stabilize and get things under control, especially against aggro. So Razor Crest having Restore 2, fantastic, trades beautifully with early space units, and the ability, when played, won't come up that often, but essentially it's you may return an upgrade from your discard to your hand, and the only upgrade we've got here, without going into the sideboard, but in the main deck, is Top Targets, which is just amazing. We'll get into that a little later, but Razor Crest being able to put Top Target back into your hand is really nice because Top Target wants to be in your discard because you want to be getting that bounty, right? So that is an ability that is relevant, so I just thought that was a great choice for a 4-drop. I'll talk about the events at the end, so we'll now go into our 5 drops. Hero Vigilance's weakest point is probably at 5 resources at the moment. The villain 5 resources look a lot better. I've included Ray here mostly for thematic reasons, but also because their stats are pretty impressive. 4-7 is nothing to sneeze at. We're talking Vader stats with 1 less power, right? And because her ability is relevant for this deck, our 2 mid-game Sentinels, Baze and Bendu, both get shields from her on-attack ability because they're not hero aspect. That can be so backbreaking for aggro decks and really lets you get that ball control near the end there if Ray starts to attack in. So, her ability, the one that's relevant here, is on attack, you may heal 2 damage from a unit, which is great for Sentinels with such high health as well. If it's a I can't quite see the card there, where is it? If it's a non-heroism unit, give a shield token to it. So giving a shield to Sentinels is, of course, fantastic. That's why we're running Village Protectors, and I'm so high on that card. So being able to heal up one of your Sentinels and chuck a shield on it, that being either Bendu or Baze, I think is really nice. And that's why Ray's in there. But is probably one of the weaker cards of the deck, so that's something to consider. Now we're going to jump over to Bendu. So Bendu didn't see really any play from my awareness in meta decks in set 1 because double Vigilance wasn't that popular, and the only deck that was doing it, which was Iden, didn't really want to run Bendu. However, we do want to run Bendu. So Bendu is a 4-7 Sentinel, so we're getting another Sentinel on curve here, and on attack, the next non-vigilant, non-heroism or non-villain card you play this phase costs 2 less. Now, of course, all of our events are non-heroism aspect, and we do have a couple of other units, Bendu being one, so that's not relevant, but Base and Regional Governor, I guess, sure. Follower of the Way, nothing that exciting. It's really to get off your Vigilance, your Takedown, or your Rivals Fall for cheap. Vigilance for 2 just sounds crazy. I don't think there's any world where you're not winning that game at that point with the value that you're getting out of that. So I think Bendu's going to have a huge target on his back, and they're really going to have to get him off the field. The fact that he comes on the same turn as your flipping Ray means that hopefully they then have to use that removal on Bendu instead of using it on Ray, which means you can hopefully, lots of hopefullys here, get Ray's Restore off a couple of times and really stabilize your health pool. So I think Bendu being a huge target here is really nice. I did originally have Obi-Wan Kenobi in this deck at that 6-point cost. However, I was encouraged to chuck Bendu in here, maybe just for the theme, if nothing else, because we are running double Vigilance. Is Bendu better than Obi? Maybe. I think there's going to have to be some more testing here, and that might be another card that flips around depending on people's preferences on that one. Moving up with units, we've then got Luke Skywalker. Luke is so underrated. I don't know if Vader is better than Luke. Luke seems really good because he's coming down, and unlike Vader, the unit he's removing, he's not taking damage back, because when Vader's ambushing, he's taking on that damage, which allows him to be so easily removed in the opponent's next action, even if he is bringing on another unit. So Luke doesn't bring on another unit, of course, but does exactly what we want him to be doing, which is bulk restore, because that's what this deck is all about. And being able to remove a unit when he hits the table, either a minus, something with 3 health left, or even bigger if one of your own units has been removed, which with all the Sentinels going on in the previous turns, there probably will be a scenario where you can get that off. So I think Luke is just fantastic, and he's getting better in a deck that can really work with him and take advantage of what he can do. So I'm a big fan of Luke. Didn't play with him a lot in set 1, but really excited to play around with him in set 2. And then finally, we get up to Chewbacca. So this is our big late game finisher. I don't know if finisher is the right word for Chewbacca, because of course he's only coming in with 4 power. I'd love him to have a bit more, but he does have grit, right, with 10 health. So as long as he doesn't just get removed from the board with whatever removal, noting that there's only a couple of cards in the game that can really take him out, as long as you've got some other bodies on the board. But his when played ability is what we really like here, and it's you may defeat a unit with 5 or less remaining HP. So that is super handy. He does, if you're going really late, his smuggle becomes semi-relevant. I guess you can play him for 11 when you're smuggling him in this deck. You probably won't do that, but it's not nothing if things are getting a bit wild and going into the late game against another control deck. But his 410, it gets way better once he's swung into a unit and gets that health ups, and he gets to start swinging for some really big damage. So we've finally got now in Hero Vigilance a big finishing card that can just swing for 4 to, let's see, 13 damage. If you've got 9 damage on him, he probably won't get there. There's going to be very few circumstances where that happens. But geez, it feels good when it's going to. So that is all of our units. As I said, there's a few that may change around as this deck evolves and as we get as the meta evolves and we work out what's good and what's not with a whole bunch more playtesting. But I think this is a really good start for a Ray Vigilance deck. Now looking at events, we've got, let's see, we start at 4. I would love a 3 cost removal. And I guess that's make an opening, right? And that's in our sideboard, so we'll talk about that a little later. But here we have Vigilance. Don't need to talk about it. We all know what it does. It's amazing. We've then got Takedown, an absolute staple, and one of the new cards, Rival's Fall. Now, I have only included Rival's Fall, which just says defeat a unit. So it can be opponent's leaders, which this deck will really need and really enjoy. So I've only put in 2 because you don't want this card early. You're more than happy to wait until the 5th turn to see this one, and you don't want to really see it before, if not later, because it's probably going to be really good at taking out your enemy's big bombs at the late game. So that's Rival's Fall. I think it will make blue decks that more powerful. Not that they weren't already doing just fine. So that's our 3 events. We've only got 3 events. That is so slim for a control deck like this, but we're really focusing on that soft control with the Sentinels and with the Restore to keep us in the game. So then we go into our 1 upgrade, which is Top Target. It is a bounty, and when I saw this, I just thought ages ago, a month ago, whenever it was, I just thought to myself, this is going to be so good, I have to use this. So it is a bounty, which means you put it on an opponent's unit, and when you kill that unit, you get to heal 4 damage from a unit or base. It's not just your base, so if your base doesn't have that much damage on it, you can be healing up your Sentinels, for instance. Or if you think that's going to be more worthwhile, you can do that. If this unit is unique, so if you put it on a unique unit, and you get to choose who you put it on, of course, heal 6 damage instead. So essentially, and you need to be killing your opponent's unit. So it's not like using a bounty in an aggro deck where it's changing up your game plan and isn't really furthering what you want to be doing. You need to be killing your opponent's units with this deck and getting to the late game where you've got all your restore down. Otherwise, you will not survive. So it just works exactly into what you want to be doing, and being able to heal 6 damage essentially for 1 resource is outrageous. So Top Target, I think it's really good. As I said before, it's coming back out of your discard pile if you play Razor Crest later in the game. So I think it's just fantastic, and it may be what really drives this style of restore heavy deck. So that's all the cards. Going into the sideboard, I've decided to start including sideboards here. We have, against aggro, we've got the Cloud City Wing Guard and Make an Opening coming into the deck, essentially to help you stabilize earlier and give you more cards coming into your hand, which enable you to stabilize earlier. What's coming out? Against aggro, I'm probably taking out Rival's Fall, depending on who their leader is. If it's your Kylos or your Sabines, more than happy to take out Rival's Fall because we can take care of them with Takedown, if not just our units on the board. Similarly, we're going to take out a single Chewbacca because 3 is probably too many. We might not even get to that late game, although probably will, because if we don't, we haven't really stabilized, right? So that's why I'm only taking out 1 Chewbacca, leaving 2 in, but then I'm probably taking out 3 Rays at this point because Ray is just not doing enough against aggro. She's not fast enough. So Ray gets cut in the aggro matchup to bring in Cloud City Wingguard and Make an Opening along with those other cards that I talked about. Now for control matchups, we're bringing in a Jedi lightsaber, or 2 if you will, and a couple of Kanan as well. And my thoughts here are I just want to push damage a little bit faster. So we're going to take out the Village Protectors here because against control decks, you don't really need those early Sentinels so much. And a Baze as well. Same, that 4-drop Sentinel, just not as relevant. So that's the 4 cards we're taking out to slot in the Lightsabers and Kanan to go a little harder and a little bit faster versus control. I have done a bit of testing with this deck, and it actually does pretty well. Does the deck get better if we start including aggression or command cards and go into a second aspect? Maybe is the answer, but the lure of a 2-cost Vigilance is just so good. That value from Bendu, along with it being double aspect, is just really tempting, and I'd love to see a game where I can do a 2-cost Vigilance. It's going to feel amazing. Is it too cute? Maybe, but we'll give it a try. We'll give it a go, and I think people are going to really enjoy running this deck or something similar, and we'll get quite a bit of competitive value out of it. However, in a more competitive setting, the sideboard plan is probably going to change. Versus control, you probably want to bring in some restocks, some bounty hunter crews. It's not really how I like to play this game, and I'm not really interested in that type of game. So I've decided not to. I've decided to bring in some different things with a bit of spice here, but I'll leave the more competitive players to work that out and get those restocks and those bounty hunter crews in to play the wild mill game that is a control versus control matchup in a tournament setting. So overall, I think Ray has serious potential. I think she's really good, and anyone saying she's not, I'm going to disagree. I'm going to put it out there and say I think she's going to be B, maybe even A tier, and do quite well in the meta. I think she will be in the meta. I think we'll see her being taken to tournaments, and we'll see her winning. We'll see her winning some games. Is she going to be absolutely dominant? Definitely not. And it'll be real interesting to see how she goes into some of those more tuned up set 1 decks. But that Restore 3, it's just too good to pass up and not have a go with. So in a Shadows of the Galaxy meta, she may be the best hero Vigilance leader that we can get, though that's probably not too difficult. We'll wait and see. We'll wait and see what Luke's doing and what he gets up to. And that brings us to the end of our Unlimited chats for today. Thank you so much for watching. My plan is to keep the Star Wars Unlimited content coming, so if you enjoyed this video, go on ahead and subscribe for more content coming soon. Importantly, make sure to keep cracking those packs and getting unleashed for Unlimited.